I had an incredible career with UPS. It was almost like the corporation rented my brain for 37 years. QHHT really changed my life at a certain point in time. It's really a healing technique. It's to heal you. I was raised Mormon, and religions use a lot of words like obedience and different things like that. And I had some really negative feelings about organized religion. My feeling about it now is that
All right, so I have a special guest with me right now. Welcome to the show, Pat Linn. Pat is a QHHT healer. He's going to explain all about what that is, his background, and start off with Pat. Why don't you introduce yourself?
my name's Pat Linn. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, part time, and in Phoenix. And I'm a QHHT healer. I did this after I retired from my corporate job at UPS. So I was there 37 years. I experienced something that QHHT really changed my life at a certain point in time. And I decided that when I retired, that that's what I wanted to do.
Explain what you were doing during your corporate life. Like, what was that like going from a corporate employee to going on this more spiritual path?
Um, the one thing I realized when I retired was that I didn't realize how much stuff was in my brain from it was almost like the corporation rented my brain for 37 years because I had so much stuff in there. And when I retired, in the first few months, I was sitting around the house thinking, what am I supposed to be doing? And I had already gotten my certification on QHHT, so I was already doing that before I retired. But I didn't have my business really structured that much at that point.
What introduced you to QHHT, and how did you even get introduced to that?
Well, I had an incredible career with UPS. I was raised in a small town. I felt like I was born into the wrong body because I was in a small mining town. And when I went to New York City for the first time, I had deja vu. It was almost like this is where I'm supposed to be. Um, And so at the time, UPS was expanding around the world. So I was essentially on a plane uh, for about 10 years, constantly setting up offices around the world. So Asia, South America, Europe. And then I lived in Europe for 6 years, um, in London and in Brussels. So my life turned out much greater than I had anticipated. I really had thought when I was younger that I just wanted to make enough money to be able to buy a plane ticket and maybe go visit Europe. And it ended up being much more than I had anticipated. But then when I got into my 50s, I really felt like that I hadn't achieved as much as I wanted to. And I was comparing myself a lot to people around me, friends that I had known for 30 years and so forth. And I felt like I hadn't achieved as much as I, so I really got into this really negative mindset about um, my accomplishments, and I hadn't accomplished that much and all those types of things. And my daughter sent me a video one day, and she knew kind of where my mind was. My daughter sent me a video of Dolores Cannon, and I happened to be working in Tampa at the time in our call center down there. We had 750 people in a call center. And I had planned a 2 week trip. And during that weekend, I went to a QHHT practitioner that was there. And and really, I didn't think that I had been hypnotized. I thought it was all stuff I made up. Um, the emotional part of it, getting rid of jealousy, anger, and all those types of things, that was kind of a side note. I didn't even realize that that was a part of it necessarily. But within a month, my life had just completely changed. I mean, my mindset had completely changed about my life. And I was at UPS about 3 more years after that. And just everything at my job changed. I was put on an assignment. I was, recognized for my work. It was almost like everything that I was feeling that I hadn't accomplished, it just started coming, recognition for what I did and all those types of things. But the energy from QHHT, it caused me to have really an awareness where my mind was and what my thoughts were about people I worked with. There were people I worked with for 25, 30 years and I couldn't stand it. But I was putting out a loving energy to everybody that was in my office. And I remember one day we were presenting our project to I think it was marketing, and they wanted us to go back and do some, more research, focus groups, I guess. And one of the guys that I had worked with for like 30 years, and I really did not, he was in engineering, I was in customer service, and I really did not like him. And I came out of that meeting, he was in the meeting. When I get out of the meeting, he says, "Hey, I have an intern coming in from Georgia Tech next week. If you need some help, just let me know and I'll send them over, and then you can just let them know what data you need and different things like that." So that was just a small example of how things changed in my life because my mindset changed about the people that were around me. And you know what? I think that when we dislike people and we're in argument, we assume a lot of things. I assumed a lot of things about this guy that probably weren't true.
Explain, I know the audience wants to know, what is QHHT, then what did you experience in that hypnotist session that sort of changed your life?
Well, I went to a practitioner. I'd watched Dolores Cannon's video, and she just talked about it in general. And I thought that the majority of it was the past life part of it. And I did go to a past life in the session that I had. But then at the end, when the practitioner interviewed me, she said, "So are there any emotional things that you would like to heal or, things that you've been through?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, jealousy, anger." I just went down a list of a couple of things. But I had thought it was more like that the past life healed, and maybe that's a part of it, as I've seen in a lot of my sessions with people in the last 8 years. But so I went in and I went to a past life. We went to the subconscious after the past life. And then she went through the healing part, physically, mentally, emotionally. And that was the part that was probably the most profound part, the subconscious work. And who's to say what part of it related to the past life or what part of it related to the subconscious, but whatever it was just a drastic change.
So in full disclosure, I actually went through a QHHT session with Pat, actually, which is why I wanted to have him on the show. So explain sort of the process, what you're doing, what Dolores Cannon sort of pioneered, and explain to folks exactly what you're doing during a QHHT session.
Well, it's kind of evolved for me over the years as far as what it actually does. And we're kind of in our physical bodies and in the world that we live in, we're in a certain dimension, and there's certain values to that dimension. We have this illness or that illness, or, I have an aunt that I don't like. But, you have all this structure about things that that make up that life. And what I've found is that once you get into QHHT, you're taking a person outside of that dimension, outside of that construct of what their life is, and you're taking them into kind of a clean slate of what their life could be. And that's a completely different dimension. So when the healing happens, the healing is allowing that person to release what is over here in the construct of their life and to adopt a different point of view of the life that they're living. So that's kind of the way that I explain it now. I think that a lot of people get into discussions about, what is the subconscious? And to me, it's, psychiatry has a version of what subconscious is. In Dolores's version of subconscious, it's really our higher self. It's the higher self, and we're a part of the higher self, and only part of us comes into this physical world. I think she mentions that maybe like 25 to 30% of the higher self comes into our physical world. And that higher self has all of the information about all the lives you've lived, all the things that you've been through. And once we leave this life, then we go back and just add on to what we've done. And that energy and that process, it becomes even bigger at that point. And what I mean by bigger is that I, my belief is, and I've talked to quite a few people about it, but I think that our goal is to become like God. And like God means that all the energy that supports the life that's around us, there's a source, and that source is gaining happiness or joy from providing that energy to others. So as we go through our process, that's essentially what our goal is, to be like source and to have energy, a loving energy that supports life, or a different planet. Or so that's the way that that's what our process is that we're going through, I feel.
Now, what you're explaining is kind of like beyond religion. So were you raised in a religious background? Do you come from a religious background?
I was raised Mormon, and I was married in the temple. I was president of the elders quorum for a few years and so forth. Um, and really, I went through a process where I had some really negative feelings about organized religion. And over the last couple of years, I'd say 3 or 4 years, that has really changed for me, because I've had a lot of clients that are, in fact, I had a guy that came to me and he was being baptized into I think it was Baptist church. He was being baptized the next week. So my feeling about it now is that I'm non-judgmental about religion. I think that it creates community. I was just talking to my daughter last night. She's still practicing Mormon, but I was just asking her, because she's gone through an awakening herself about outside of the church. And she thinks it's community. That's kind of what the church is. But the negative aspects, or the alternate aspects, I guess I should describe it as, in religion, is that everything exists outside of you, in a religion. And then there's certain rituals that you go through that are supposed to um, describe, or if you perform those religions, you're supposed to be a good person. So in other words, I read my scriptures every day, I go to church every Sunday, I do all these things. But our spiritual journey is internal. There's nothing external that can really, we can go through processes to create knowledge and understanding, but the real journey is within us. It isn't external. I can't force you to believe a certain thing. You have to experience it yourself. And I think that's what my daughter's going through now, is that just because you're doing these things doesn't necessarily make you a good person. And religions use a lot of words like obedience and different things like that. And so I don't judge it anymore, but I'm like, what are they being obedient to? We should be obedient to ourselves, basically. I think, we should honor ourselves and do the things that make us better people.
So in having conversations with you, I know that Mormonism is, like, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, so I would imagine there's some
Very
similarities. Like,
similar.
yeah, I would imagine there's some similarities here. Kind of cult-like environment where you don't go outside and associate with worldly people, that sort of thing. How did
Yeah.
you sort of handle this kind of transformation? Like, how did you balance? I mean, I know you went through some period of dislike for the religion, but how did you kind of balance the spiritual information that you were learning?
Well, it's interesting and I've talked to a lot of Mormons that have left the church. In fact, I was just at a restaurant the other day, and there was a girl there, and she said, I just moved down from Salt Lake. We got in this whole Mormon discussion. and she was living an alternative lifestyle, and she was trying to figure out, she's 21 years old, the poor thing. She was trying to like figure out, what her life is going to be. But I was very lucky because as soon as I think I was divorced in November, and I was assigned to move to Atlanta, UPS's corporate office in January or February of the following year. So it was like I wasn't really around anybody that I wasn't around a social group of people that would make me feel bad about who I was. I guess that's the point. And I think that that's what makes it difficult. And you probably went through that in the Jehovah's Witness process or in the church, that you really have a whole construct of people that you've grown up with and family that's still practicing it and all these different things. And it's very difficult for some people to get out of it. I was fortunate because I was just kind of catapulted, out, and I was among, New Yorkers. So, I mean, and everything's kind of open there. So, but that is kind of my story of, but I think one of the things that I would say about that is that I've grown to respect, because I have daughters still practicing the religion, and I have grandchildren that are teenagers and they're still practicing the religion. And so I feel that it's my responsibility to respect their journey and whatever they're doing and to support them. I've been to two of my grandchildren's baptisms. I think it's important to be there and to support them regardless of, because whatever their journey is their journey. And I think we should support people in their journey.
Do they still accept you the same way since you've kind of diverged from the Mormon religion, though? Or are you still accepted by your family?
Yeah, I'm very close to my grandchildren, and we just have great relationships, and we laugh a lot. And in the last years, I've with my granddaughter and a few of my grandsons that are getting into the late teens, we talk about things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily talk about in church or, things like that. So, and,
Gotcha.
I mean, I think that a lot of religions, they ignore parts of growing up that are just normal parts of growing up.
Oh, it's off limits in a lot of cases, right? The kind of experimentation that happens as you reach the teenage years.
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of put myself back into their shoes and ask them questions about what's going on. Do you have a girlfriend and what's she like and those types of things. So I really just love being around them and seeing how they're developing as human beings. And I think the early 20s are a very difficult time. It's a very lonely time because you come from a structure where you're protected and everything, and now it's like, okay, it's all on your shoulders. So I enjoy spending time with my grandchildren that are in that stage. So
That's great. So let's go back to the QHHT thing. So as you started to learn about it, you went through the process yourself. When did you decide to become a practitioner? What was that like?
I went to I think it might have been a year or so after I had my session. And I think I had about 33 years, I guess, at UPS at that point. And at that, I think people were looking at me like, when's he going to get out of here? But I was starting to think about what I wanted to do after I retired. And I was still young. I was 56. And so, I mean, you're still young and have the ability to go do things. But I went to a training in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, which was conducted by Dolores Cannon's daughter. And then there's 3 levels of QHHT. So that's a level 1. To get to level 2, you've got to do a certain number of sessions. And then I went for training in Canada, in Vancouver, Canada, for level 2. And then level 3, I was scheduled to go, and then COVID came up. So that really kind of through, through that out. And I just haven't gone back to revisit it. I mean, I still get referrals from their office in Eureka Springs, so they know, they can see from my reviews that what my work's like, I guess. Yeah.
So before I go, I gotta ask you this because I couldn't be a good journalist without asking, what does QHHT stand for? What's going on with the process?
Quantum healing hypnosis technique. And I think if you watch Dolores's videos, she talks a lot about past lives, and she's written this series of books called The Convoluted Universe. So it gets into this really esoteric type world of metaphysics, I guess, and so that's what I thought it was, and I think that's what a lot of people are concerned about. But it's really a healing technique. It's to heal you and to allow you. The way I try to explain to my clients is that hopefully when you leave here with a clean slate, as clean as we can possibly get you to, where you're no longer relying on these structures that you've built up, whatever those may be. And a lot of my clients have been abused when they were younger. So there's a lot of energy when we go through traumatic things, energy, it gets retained within our body. And one of the processes that we go through in QHHT is releasing or healing that energy, getting it released from the body, so that the person can move forward in confidence and more certainty in their life instead of being afraid.
Gotcha. So, how did the first few sessions go for you? What did you kind of learn about yourself and learn about your clients?
I have learned so much about myself. It's hard to almost even put it into words, or into like a short description. But I think the thing that I've learned the most is that what we tell ourselves is really, we're more responsible for our lives than we really think that we are. And I've had clients, come in that are going through divorces and different things like that. And, somebody will sit down and say, oh, I've been married to a narcissist for 15 years and all these kind of things. And my question is like, well, what's your role been in it? Because you've been there for 15 years, there's a reason that you're there. And sometimes people are very surprised. They're just like, they're kind of just, well, I have had a role in it, but not really. I really don't want to be. It's like, no, but you really do have a role in it. You've been there for 15. And I remember I've had a few clients that their viewpoint of their life is that nothing's good going on in their life, and then they'll talk about when things good happened. I had one guy that told me that he loved to visit his grandmother in West Palm Beach, but he said that nothing good had ever happened in his life. And I was like, well, you just told me that you love visiting your grandma in West Palm Beach. He goes, maybe that's my problem, because his viewpoint. But I think that the thing that I've learned the most is that non-judgment is something that we really have to strive for, because we can look at other people and think that they're living their life a certain way that we don't agree with, but that's their journey, and everybody's life on this planet is leading in the same direction. We're all striving to go in a certain direction towards source. And even the person that is doing something that we think is horrible, that there's always a way for that person to get back on track. And maybe that's the thing that gets them back on track. We
Part of
just
their
don't.
Story. Yep.
It's part of the story. And I think so I've kind of, the other thing, and like I said, I didn't think I had so much to say about it, but I do. But the other thing is that if you look at this life as a judgmental life, which is what organized religion looks at it as, you're going to be judged by this life. In Dolores's world, or the metaphysical world, or in a lot of worlds today, we're living an experiential life. So we're experiencing certain things, and it's not judged whether it's right or wrong. It's an experience. And regardless of what that experience is, you're gaining knowledge and understanding and lessons and so forth from that. So that is kind of a big separation in between organized religion and how a lot of people were raised, and then now they're in this experiential life, and it relieves a lot of stress when you realize that your goal isn't, there isn't a goal to your life. It's not happiness or financial or whatever's going on in your, and when I say my prayers, I pray that I have the right perspective about what I'm going through. I don't ask to change what it is, because I've, the last couple of years, I think I mentioned to you before we started recording, it's been a very difficult year with legal issues with my father's estate and different things like that. And you're being forced to deal with things that you don't want to deal with. And so when you get in situations like that, you really have to change your perspective about what it is that you're there to do.
Well said, well said. So I always end with a few questions. I'm going to ask you a few standard questions. So what does awakening mean to you? What would be your definition of awakening?
Awakening to me is realizing that you're a part of the oneness. So, and I do mediumship work, and, people call me, ask me about their husband passed away, and, what does he have to say? And I had one client that called me, before I got into QHHT, I did psychic mediumship work. And there's a town in Florida called Casadega. You probably know about it. And I used to go there and take classes on mediumship. But anyway, the point I was trying to make is that as soon as he got to heaven, he said that, number one, there wasn't any religion, and that he felt so bad about looking at people as those people. That was his word. Those people, those people are the bad people. Those people are the ones that are causing all the problems in the world. And we don't even realize that we're a part.
We're part of those people.
Yeah, we're just as bad as they are, as far, I mean, not everybody, but we could be just as bad as they are in our
Next, so the next question is, what's the most valuable lesson that you've learned in life?
The most valuable, and I've talked a lot to my daughters about this. I didn't appreciate things as they were happening. So there were things that happened in like when I was living in Europe, my children were going to private schools, flying business class everywhere, living in a penthouse, all these types of things. I just, for some reason, as I look back on that, I really was not enjoying that and acknowledging it for what it was. And I think that that's my life now, is that the life is never going to be the same as it is right now. So enjoy what you're going through, or learn from it, learn from the situation.
All right, the last question is, what would be your advice to someone who's going through or experiencing a spiritual awakening?
One of the things that was confusing to me was that you have all these modalities of, you have shamans. I said, my daughter, I'm not really on social media that much, because it kind of just fills my brain up with stuff that I don't really want to have to think about.
Who does that?
But there's so many modalities out there, and there's people that, people follow certain people on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. But I think the biggest lesson for anyone going through a spiritual awakening is that all these modalities are leading to the same thing. And the same thing is elevating your vibration, feeling that you're one with all of life. And one of the ways that you can kind of tell that you're in that space is that you have awareness about yourself, and you also have the ability to control your emotions. I think that's one of the biggest things. And I was trying to think like, well, how do I know I'm awakening? And how do I know that, that it's that you have control over it. And if you've been able to release fear, anger, forgive everybody in your life for everything that they've done, and to clear yourself of those things that cause a lower vibration, then you are awakening if you've recognized that. So that's what advice I would give would be that all the modalities are leading to the same thing. Don't get confused about ayahuasca and Reiki and, tapping or, whatever. And in the very beginning, I was very confused I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there. What do I do? And
There's so much information to learn.
yeah. And it's like, should I follow Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra or whatever? And everybody's talking about the same thing. It's not anything different. So.
All right. So in conclusion, where can folks go to learn more about you? If they want to book a session, where should they go?
They can go to patlinn.com. I have my phone numbers there and my email address. And you can also subscribe to my website. So yeah, that's where you can go. And right now I'm in Arizona. I've been here for 3 months. So I do sessions in Arizona and Atlanta. And I visited Africa a couple of times and I did sessions in Kenya. I listed myself in Kenya and had 5 sessions in Kenya. So this is a global thing. It's not just a United States. There's an awakening, I think, that's happening around the world. And I was so surprised. I listed myself in Kenya within the first week. I just had all these emails about, when are you going to be here and how do we do this? 3 of the people had been educated in the US and went back to Kenya, and then 2 of them were local people that had not really traveled outside of Kenya. But everybody had the same mentality about, awakening to this new oneness and awareness of who they are and what they are.
Beautiful, beautiful words. Thank you so much, Brother Pat. I want to thank you for joining us. Thanks for sharing that wisdom with us.
All right.